My son-in-law slid his phone into my lap during Sunday dinner. One text changed everything. It read, "Dad, check your retirement account right now, then pretend you're having chest pains and leave." For a second, I thought it had to be some kind of mistake. Marcus wasn't a prankster. He wasn't dramatic. And he definitely wasn't the type of man who interrupted family dinner with a message like that. So I did exactly what he told me to do. And I wish I hadn't looked. The moment I opened my banking app, every bit of color drained from my face. The account I'd spent decades building showed almost nothing left. My retirement fund, my security, my future, gone. I was sitting at my own dining table when it happened. Across from me sat my wife, smiling as she poured wine into everyone's glasses. At that moment, I had no idea whether she was part of the problem or completely innocent. Have you ever trusted someone so completely that questioning them never even crossed your mind? Have you ever looked around a room and believed every person there was on your side? Most of us have. That's what makes betrayal so dangerous. It rarely arrives wearing a warning sign. Sometimes it shows up at Sunday dinner. Sometimes it sits across from you and asks if you'd like another slice of roast beef. What happened during the next 30 minutes exposed a secret that left me questioning every conversation I'd had for the previous 3 years. Why did Marcus tell me to fake chest pains? Why did he need me out of the house immediately? Who was trying to take my money? And how did my son-in-law know before I did? If you've ever trusted the wrong person, subscribe now. The next story could save you. To understand why that text terrified me, you need to know who was sitting at that table. My name is Arthur Bennett, and at 62 years old, I thought I'd learned every lesson life had to teach. I was wrong. 6 years before that Sunday dinner, I lost my first wife, Linda, to cancer. We had been married for 34 years. For months after she passed, the house felt unbearably quiet. I'd catch myself reaching for a second coffee mug in the morning before remembering she wasn't there anymore. Friends invited me out. My daughter checked on me constantly. But loneliness has a way of following you home. No matter how busy I stayed, every evening ended the same way: an empty chair across the room and too much silence. Then I met Evelyn. Evelyn was warm, confident, and full of energy. She laughed easily. She remembered small details. Most importantly, she made me feel like my life wasn't over. Within a year, we were inseparable. A few of my friends urged caution. One even pulled me aside and said, "Arthur, don't rush this. You're still vulnerable." I brushed it off. People often mistake happiness for foolishness when they've lost it themselves. My daughter Chloe was hesitant at first, but Evelyn worked hard to win her over. Over time, family dinners became normal again. For the first time in years, I felt whole. I genuinely believed I'd been given a second chance. Chloe remained the center of my world. She's smart, stubborn, and far more observant than I am. Her husband Marcus was equally impressive. Marcus worked as a senior fraud analyst for a large credit union. His job involved identifying financial crimes, suspicious transactions, and account takeovers before customers lost their money. Whenever Marcus talked about work, I listened with interest. What I never expected was that one day his expertise would end up protecting me. Looking back now, there were warning signs. Small ones, easy to explain away. Evelyn often asked about my retirement accounts. She wanted to know how investments were performing. She asked where I kept financial documents. A few times she even joked that I had too many passwords to remember. At the time, I saw those questions as normal conversations between married people. I told myself she was interested because we were building a future together. I thought she was planning our future. I had no idea she was studying my finances. That Sunday started exactly the way hundreds of Sundays had before it. The smell of roast beef filled the house long before Chloe and Marcus arrived. By 6 o'clock, everyone was gathered around the dining table. The television in the family room played a football game quietly in the background. Every so often, the crowd noise drifted into the dining room, mixing with the sound of conversation and clinking silverware. Evelyn moved comfortably between the kitchen and the table, topping off drinks and making sure everyone had enough food. A bottle of red wine sat open near the center of the table. People were laughing. Stories were being shared. Nothing felt unusual, at least not at first. The first person who caught my attention wasn't Evelyn. It was Marcus. Normally, Marcus was one of the most relaxed people in the room. That night, he seemed distracted. Every few minutes, his eyes drifted toward his phone. Sometimes he glanced down at it without even unlocking the screen. Other times he checked it quickly and slipped it back into his pocket. His jaw looked tight. His shoulders seemed tense. He barely touched the roast beef Evelyn had spent hours preparing. The more I watched him, the more I wondered if something was bothering him. I tried making conversation. Marcus answered every question politely, but his responses were shorter than usual. Meanwhile, Chloe didn't appear to notice anything strange. She was talking about work, sharing stories, and laughing at her own jokes. Evelyn looked completely at ease. She smiled often. She poured wine. She asked everyone if they wanted seconds. If someone had asked me that evening who seemed suspicious, I wouldn't have pointed at Evelyn. My attention was fixed entirely on Marcus. In fact, I started wondering if he was dealing with some kind of personal problem. As dinner continued, I caught Marcus checking his phone one more time. This time, his expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough for me to notice. His eyes narrowed. He read something. Then he locked the screen and looked across the table directly at me. For a brief second, neither of us said a word. The room carried on as normal. The football game played. The laughter continued. The wine glasses clinked together. Then Marcus dropped his napkin. Marcus bent down to pick up his napkin. At least, that's what everyone at the table believed. As he reached under the table, I felt something lightly tap against my leg. A second later, a phone landed in my lap. I looked down. It was Marcus's. The screen was already unlocked. A message filled the display. "Dad, check your retirement account right now. Then pretend you're having chest pains and leave." I read it twice, then a third time. My first thought was that Marcus had made some kind of mistake. My second thought was much worse. What if he hadn't? Without changing my expression, I slowly pulled my own phone from my pocket. Around me, dinner continued. Nobody appeared to notice anything unusual. I opened my banking app, logged in, waited for the account screen to load. The balance appeared. For a moment, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. The previous morning, my retirement account had contained $360,200. Now it showed barely $200. I blinked. Looked again. Same number. My chest tightened for real. Not because of a heart attack. Because 30 years of saving had apparently vanished between lunch and dinner. I couldn't make sense of it. Nothing about it felt possible. A rush of questions slammed into my mind all at once. Was the app malfunctioning? Had I been hacked? Was the money temporarily frozen? Or had somebody actually taken it? I stared at the screen, hoping the numbers would somehow correct themselves. They didn't. If you've ever worked for decades to build financial security, you know what that moment feels like. Your future flashes through your mind. The plans, the sacrifices, the years of discipline. Now let me ask you something. What would you do if your life savings vanished in seconds? Because I had only one choice. Trust Marcus. I locked my phone and slid it back into my pocket. Then I followed the instructions. Slowly, I grabbed my chest. I let out a strained breath. My fork slipped from my hand and clattered against the plate. Immediately, every conversation stopped. "Dad?" Chloe asked. I leaned forward in my chair. "My chest," I gasped. "Something's wrong." The reaction was instant. Chloe jumped to her feet. Marcus pushed his chair back. Voices overlapped. Questions came from every direction. The peaceful family dinner disappeared in a matter of seconds. One moment we were discussing football. The next, everyone was in emergency mode. In the middle of the confusion, my eyes found Evelyn. I expected panic. I expected fear. I expected the reaction of a worried wife watching her husband struggle. Instead, I saw something I couldn't quite explain. Something about her expression felt wrong. Not obvious, not dramatic. Just enough to make the hair on my neck stand up. Evelyn's reaction was the first thing that truly frightened me. The moment I grabbed my chest, Marcus took control of the room. "Don't wait for an ambulance," he said firmly. "The community hospital is only a few minutes away." Before anyone could argue, he was already helping me out of my chair. Chloe looked terrified. She kept asking if I could breathe. I stayed committed to the act, clutching my chest and speaking in short, strained sentences. Then Evelyn moved toward us. "I'm coming too," she said immediately. Her voice sounded calm, but there was urgency behind it. Marcus shook his head. "No. Stay with Chloe. We'll call from the hospital." For the first time all evening, I saw Evelyn hesitate. Within seconds, Marcus had me outside. The cool evening air hit my face as we hurried across the driveway. Behind us, the front door opened. I heard Evelyn call my name. Marcus didn't stop. He opened the passenger door of his SUV and helped me inside. The moment he got behind the wheel, he started the engine and pulled away from the curb. In the side mirror, I caught one final glimpse of my house. Evelyn was standing near the front steps, watching us leave. Then we turned the corner, and she disappeared from view. The second we were out of sight, I dropped the performance. "My chest is fine," I said. "Now tell me what's happening." Marcus kept both hands on the steering wheel. His eyes never left the road. "Just give me another minute." "No," I snapped. "My retirement account is empty." The words felt unreal, even as I said them. 360,000 doesn't just disappear. Marcus nodded once. "I know." His calmness made me even more anxious. Most people would have been panicking. Marcus wasn't. It was as if he had already worked through the problem several steps ahead of me. That frightened me more than the missing money. Finally, Marcus spoke. His voice was steady. "Dad, someone inside your house just tried to steal everything." The sentence hung in the air. I stared at him. Someone inside your house. Not a hacker overseas. Not a random criminal. Someone close enough to access my home. Someone close enough to know my routines. A cold feeling settled into my stomach. Whoever was behind this knew exactly where to strike. Before I tell you what Marcus discovered, subscribe now. Most people never see betrayal coming. Subscribe before the next twist catches you off guard. I wanted names. I wanted proof. I wanted answers. Instead, Marcus accelerated onto the main road and checked the time on the dashboard. His focus wasn't on what had already happened. It was on what might happen next. That's when I understood something important. Marcus wasn't making assumptions. He wasn't guessing. He knew something. He knew something. A few minutes later, Marcus exited the main road and headed toward the downtown business district. Finally, he started talking. About 20 minutes before dinner, a fraud alert crossed my desk. I frowned. What does that have to do with me? Everything. Marcus explained that his team routinely monitored large, unusual transactions that matched certain risk patterns. Most alerts turned out to be legitimate. This one didn't. A wire transfer request for $360,000 had been submitted from an account belonging to Arthur Bennett. My account. My stomach tightened. The destination account wasn't in the United States, Marcus continued. It was an offshore account. For a moment, I couldn't even respond. Marcus continued explaining while I sat frozen in the passenger seat. The transfer was initiated from your home internet connection. That statement hit me like a punch. My home. Not a public network. Not some criminal operating from another state. My house. The place where I'd eaten breakfast that morning. The place where my wife was still sitting. I shook my head. There has to be some mistake. Marcus immediately answered. There isn't. According to the system logs, the transfer request had been submitted only minutes before dinner. Everything had been timed carefully. The amount, the destination, the timing. Whoever started the transfer knew exactly how much money was sitting in my retirement account. I rubbed my forehead. If the transfer was submitted already, why isn't the money gone? Marcus glanced at me briefly. Because one step was still missing. Then he explained something I'd never heard before. For transfers of that size, the bank required an additional verification call before releasing the funds. The account holder had to confirm the transaction. Normally, the bank would call my home landline. I nodded. That part made sense. Then Marcus delivered another piece of information. Someone had forwarded my landline to a separate phone, a burner phone. I stared at him. My pulse started racing again. Whoever did this wasn't acting on impulse. This had been prepared in advance. Weeks, maybe months in advance. The SUV fell silent. I already knew the answer. I just didn't want to hear it spoken aloud. Marcus finally said it. Dad. Evelyn was waiting for the bank's confirmation call. I felt as if all the air had left my lungs. Every memory from the past 3 years came rushing back. The questions about my accounts. The interest in my investments. The comments about passwords. The curiosity I had mistaken for concern. Suddenly, every conversation looked different. Every explanation sounded different. I wasn't thinking about the money anymore. I was thinking about the woman I had trusted with my life. The missing money hurt. The betrayal hurt more. I had married Evelyn because I believed she loved me. Now I was being forced to consider a possibility that felt impossible only an hour earlier. What if the marriage itself had been part of the plan? I lowered my head and closed my eyes. That's when Marcus revealed something else. But Marcus had already started setting a trap. 10 minutes later, we arrived at Marcus's office. Even though it was Sunday evening, several members of his fraud team were already waiting. The moment we walked inside, everyone moved quickly. Computer screens lit up. Phones started ringing. Account records were pulled up. For the first time since dinner, I saw proof that this nightmare was real. One employee confirmed that the transfer was still pending. Another verified that the destination account had been flagged. Within minutes, additional security holds were placed on my retirement account. Then came the words I desperately needed to hear. The transfer is frozen. I closed my eyes and exhaled. At least the money hadn't disappeared forever. The next call wasn't to the bank. It was to law enforcement. Marcus wanted everything documented immediately. Transaction records were preserved. Phone routing information was collected. Account activity logs were secured. The goal wasn't just recovering my money. It was proving exactly how the attempt had happened. Part of me wanted to drive straight home and confront Evelyn. I wanted answers. I wanted explanations. I wanted to hear her deny it to my face. Marcus had a different idea. And thankfully, he was thinking more clearly than I was. "We don't confront her yet," Marcus said. I stared at him. Why not? Because people make mistakes when plans fail. That was the strategy. Instead of rushing home, we watched. Marcus and his team monitored account activity. They tracked incoming calls connected to the transfer attempt. They watched for any effort to restart the transaction. Meanwhile, my phone began buzzing. Evelyn called once, then twice, then 4 more times. She left messages asking about my condition. At least, that's what she claimed. Marcus wasn't interested in her words. He was interested in her behavior. Every minute that passed increased the pressure on whoever had started the transfer. While we waited, I replayed the last 3 years in my mind. The questions about my savings, the interest in account statements, the casual comments about passwords, the requests to organize financial paperwork together. Each memory carried a different meaning now. The hardest part wasn't realizing I had missed warning signs. The hardest part was realizing how many excuses I had made for them. Every concern had received a defense. Every doubt had received an explanation. Because I wanted to believe the best. Then one of Marcus's coworkers looked up from his screen. "We've got movement." The room went quiet. A new series of calls had started. Multiple attempts. Repeated activity. Someone was trying desperately to figure out why the transfer hadn't gone through. Marcus looked at me. I looked back at him. At that exact moment, Evelyn finally realized the transfer failed. Once Evelyn realized the transfer wasn't moving, her behavior changed dramatically. The concerned messages stopped. The missed calls kept coming, one after another. At first, she sounded worried. Soon, that worry turned into impatience. Then frustration. Several voicemails arrived within minutes of each other. She wanted to know where I was, why I wasn't answering, why Marcus wasn't answering. The woman who had seemed calm during dinner suddenly appeared desperate to regain control of a situation that was slipping away from her. That alone told me more than words ever could. A short time later, Marcus, 2 officers, and I returned to my house. My stomach twisted the entire drive. Part of me still hoped there had been some misunderstanding. A small part of me wanted to walk through the door and discover everyone was wrong. That hope disappeared almost immediately. Evelyn was waiting inside. The second she saw us, her eyes locked onto the officers. Her expression changed. She wasn't relieved that I was healthy. She wasn't emotional after believing I might be having a medical emergency. She looked alarmed, as though she already knew why law enforcement had arrived. The officers presented the information carefully. Records showed the transfer request, the account destination, the phone forwarding, the verification setup. Every detail pointed in the same direction. Evelyn listened quietly at first. Then her composure began to crack. Questions became arguments. Arguments became accusations. She claimed everyone was overreacting. She insisted there had been a misunderstanding. But the evidence kept piling up. Each explanation collapsed almost as quickly as she offered it. For the first time since I'd met her, I wasn't looking at the woman I married. I was looking at someone I barely recognized. I looked directly at her. "Why?" I asked. It was the only question that mattered. For a moment, she said nothing. Then the truth started coming out. Not all at once. Piece by piece. Money had always been part of the attraction. My retirement savings represented security, comfort, opportunity. The more she talked, the worse it became. What shocked me wasn't the admission itself. It was the lack of regret. There were no tears, no apology, no guilt, only anger that the transfer failed, only frustration that Marcus had intervened before the money disappeared. At that moment, any doubt I still carried disappeared. The woman I trusted had been planning to take everything I spent decades building. Now, I want to hear from you. If you were standing in my shoes that night, what would your reaction have been? Guilty or not? Tell me below. The good news came quickly. Because Marcus acted when he did, the transfer never reached the offshore account. The freeze remained in place while investigators completed their review. Eventually, every dollar was secured. My retirement savings stayed exactly where they belonged. When I saw the full balance restored, I felt relief. Not celebration. Relief. There was a difference. The money represented decades of hard work. Losing it would have changed the rest of my life. Thankfully, that chapter ended before the damage became permanent. The financial side was only part of the story. Criminal charges followed. The evidence trail was too strong to ignore. At the same time, divorce proceedings began. That decision was surprisingly easy. Trust had been broken beyond repair. There was nothing left to rebuild. The woman I married and the woman revealed that night were clearly not the same person. At least not the person I believed she was. For weeks afterward, I spent a lot of time reflecting. I wasn't just thinking about Evelyn. I was thinking about myself, about the moments I dismissed, the questions I ignored, the concerns I explained away. One lesson stood above all the others. Trust is important. But trust should never replace verification. The people closest to us deserve respect. That doesn't mean they should receive unlimited access to everything we've worked for. Good intentions and good judgment are not the same thing. The scariest thing wasn't losing $360,000. It was realizing the person sleeping beside me thought I was too blind to notice. If you're not subscribed yet, what's stopping you? Let me know below, and don't miss the next story.